Well, this is absolutely hilarious. Like, genuinely hilarious. Now, we're going to look at this from an angle of not just Doctor Who, but obviously Doctor Who's a part of this. And who makes Doctor Who is the BBC. And they've claimed that a report basically accusing them of a woke bias, a left-leaning bias, is nonsense. They've said no, it's not true. I mean, it is. It absolutely is true. In everything that they do is very, very clear to see. But I think it's important to note, it's not just the BBC, right? I mean, this is across the board, near enough. Every single movie studio is doing the same thing. Every single movie studio does the same thing. The BBC is not an outlier in this. They are just part of a larger puzzle. But it's funny when they come out and say, no, we're not doing this. Of course you are. Of course, everyone is. Everyone knows that you all are. And you know that we know you're lying, and yet you still persist in lying. Again, Doctor Who is a great case study of that, quite frankly. Doctor Who is the perfect example. This is apparently a 15-year-old child, trans child as well. Pretty certain they were playing a 15-year-old. And it's female presenting. This is a male presenting Time Lord who just wouldn't understand what a woman presenting trans 15-year-old would go through or some shit. I mean, just that alone is a headache of absolute nonsense. But that's something which was in a Doctor Who episode. So, work that one out, guys. So the BBC has criticised research accusing the UK broadcaster of peddling viewers a steady diet of woke bias, including news about slavery and gender diversity storylines in drama. Well, that's true. That's categorically true. They even had some nonsense with respect to, like trying to rewrite history as well, claiming that black people were always in the UK and stuff like this. There's nothing to say that black people shouldn't be in the UK. That's not what anyone is saying. I'm sure some fringe racists are. But also it's important to understand history, right? History is important because you can't claim you're oppressed whilst wiping what was part of your oppressive history. Right? Like, that just doesn't make any sense. That's nonsense. And to appreciate how far we've come as a society, we need to understand how bad we were in the past. That's important. It's important. It's important that that stuff isn't just washed away. So the BBC accused the Campaign for Common Sense, a group that advocates for freedom of expression, of cherry-picking examples of so-called woke issues from thousands of hours of output. The Campaign for Common Sense is yet to publish its research, but the group appears to have collated examples of content that has upset relatively small numbers of viewers, and the BBC said it did not constitute analysis. Now, that doesn't... Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's cherry picking. I mean, you can look at a handful of any sort of historical dramas to see that they've inserted diversity quotas for reasons, right? I mean, that's just normal stuff. They do it all the time everywhere. And again, Doctor Who's a great case study of this. They removed Davros from his life support device because Russell T Davies claimed it was a wheelchair, and everyone that views Davros would view all people in wheelchairs as villains? I mean, it's just absolute insanity. There's such great examples of... And again, it's just so laughable that they're trying to deny it. And it's not even to say... The BBC's not... they're not the sole proprietor of woke shite. Every movie studio does it. Right? So the findings were shared with the Daily Telegraph, which reported that the Campaign for Common Sense surveyed BBC content in an attempt to expose bias over issues including race and gender. Doctor Who even had anyway, whatever. The group said BBC News published 55 separate stories about slavery, including people reflecting on their historical links to the slave trade. The Campaign for Common Sense pointed out how dramas had embraced issues around race, describing how an episode of Waterloo Road featured students revolting over their school's slavery links. I mean, this is just pathetic. And you might say, well, that's because students are doing this. Sure, but students are fucking stupid, and they shouldn't be encouraged to do such nonsense. They're idiots. They're absolute morons. The research added that gender issues were also explored in BBC dramas. This included a June episode of Casualty, in which non-binary character Saar Brockner discussed their surgery. Perfect, great. A series about paramedic issues with non-binary people. Great. As Deadline reported, the Casualty storyline received 142 complaints from disgruntled audience members. More recently, Doctor Who received 140... You got to remember as well, just as an FYI, right? The main people that watch this stuff are old people now. Because the UK, it's not young people that are watching this stuff, generally speaking. It's much older people. And older people, not heavily motivated to complain about a lot of stuff. Yeah, sure they are, but they're going to pick up the phone and actually do this. Old people are technophobic. So the fact that they're complaining, it does speak quite a lot, actually. More recently, Doctor Who received 144 complaints from people who felt the inclusion of Yasmin Finney's transgender character Rose was inappropriate. It was. The Campaign for Common Sense said this research reveals that, rather than upholding those high standards of impartiality, parts of the BBC continue to peddle a steady diet of woke bias, both through the plot lines of dramas, but also in some of the news coverage. And here's actually a great example of someone who works for the BBC who is so empowered and emboldened with their woke culture. BBC star struggles with too many white colleagues. That is racist. Swap out white for black and see how that goes down, guys. That is incredibly racist. And this is all true. This isn't something which, I'm pulling out my butthole. This is true. Absolutely true. Although I need to find another article for it. Here you go, right. Niall Arthanayaki says working at overwhelmingly white BBC is bad for his mental health. Oh my god, I'm just seeing white people everywhere in a predominantly white country. Oh my god. What the fuck? I mean, this is incredibly racist. It's really affecting me that I walk in and all I see is white people. Sorry, that's a legit quote from this man. Now, if I said, it's really affecting me that I walk in and all I see is black people, people would go, holy fuck, Mr. H, you're a racist cunt. Wouldn't you? Because obviously, that's quite racist. I've seen a lot of people leave this building because they couldn't deal with the culture. What white culture? What are you talking about, you dunce? It's absolutely insane. I don't think there's a single Muslim involved in the senior editorial processes at BBC Radio 5 Live, he added. The hardest thing is to walk into a room, look around and nobody looks like you. Is it? Is it? Apparently he's looking for the bully in the playground. Always. What a sad, sad little man. So, that is absolutely the BBC. And yes, they're 100% woke. Cherry picking a handful of examples is what the BBC said, or highlighting genuine mistakes in thousands of hours of output does not constitute analysis, and it's not a true representation of BBC content. We're proud that our output seeks to represent all audiences in a range of stories and perspectives. Across the entirety of our services, there will of course be occasions when people disagree with or want to challenge what they have watched or heard, and we have well publicised routes for them to do that. I mean, it's... yeah. Sure. Doctor Who's woke as they come, obviously. And the BBC is as well, obviously. And so is every other movie studio in Hollywood, obviously. This isn't like news, it's just funny that they're trying to deny it.